Today's word of the day is pablum. Pablum means bland or insipid intellectual fare. The word pablum comes from Stone Mattress, a collection of short stories by the inimitable Margaret Atwood. Since she began writing in the 1960s, Atwood has published more than 60 works, many of which have won awards and been turned into television shows and movies. At the moment, Atwood is of course most famous for The Handmaid's Tale, her dystopian fiction about a world in which human reproductivity plummets, religious sects take over the government, and fertile women are enslaved as childbearing handmaids. Elizabeth Moss stars in Hulu's adaptation, and I watched the first season. It's fantastic. I even dressed up a couple years ago as a handmaid for Halloween. It's since become way too scary for me to watch, in part because Atwood's dystopia is cutting a bit too close to home. You know, here in America, we're mired in a deadly pandemic, and we're currently watching Supreme Court confirmation hearings for a devoutly Catholic justice whom most believe would give the federal government greater control over women's reproductive choices. But back to Atwood's Stone Mattress. The first story in this nearly decade-old collection is called Alphenland, and I love this tale because it's from the perspective of an older female kind of fiction fantasy writer looking back on her life after her husband's recent passing. And there's this delicious part where I suspect Atwood is actually skewering like an ex-boyfriend from her youth who dared to dismiss her talent. The main character recalls how this cheating ex-poet that she'd been dating, Gavin, would poo-poo her fantasy stories while basically living off of her royalties. And when she finally broke up with him, he insults her, saying, in return for which Gavin, astonished at first by the scrappiness displayed by his erstwhile mild moon maid, gathered his sarcasm together and told her that she was a flake, that her poems were worthless, that her blowjobs were inept, that her idiotic Alphenland was juvenile pablum, and that he had more talent in his bumhole than she had in her entire tiny powder puff of a brain. So much for true and love. I mean, right? Like, how good is that? Atwood is an extraordinary writer, and life, in my opinion, is not complete unless you've read at least one of her richly detailed stories with their beautiful, elevated language. My name is Cate Holahan. I'm an author of psychological suspense stories, and I love the English language, and I love, love, love all the words in it that help us say exactly what we mean. Words matter. Choose yours wisely.